Welcome, everyone. My name is Sean Shaw, and this is Vanguards of Democracy. Today just happens to be a cherished holiday here in Tampa Bay. It's Gasparilla, where everyone around the Bay comes together to celebrate our loud, vibrant, chaotic, and one-of-a-kind city as only the locals can. City Councilman Joe Citro was nice enough to take time away from his especially busy schedule to highlight Tampa's recent victories and foreshadow some of the more exciting developments on the horizon for our city. But first, what better way to set the tone for our Gasparilla episode than to invite a real-life Buccaneer, former Tampa Bay Buccaneer Ryan Nece. Mr. Nece has joined us today to give his insights on the tension between the integrity of the sport of football and the safety of the players, and what we can do to strike a better balance. All of that is coming up right now, so stay tuned. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Vanguards of Democracy. It's your host, Sean Shaw. I'm happy to be here with you in the new year, and we've got an awesome guest here with us today, and that's Ryan Nece, formerly of the Bucs, the Ryan Nece Foundation, all kinds of good stuff going in the community. Ryan, I appreciate you joining us today, man. How are you doing in the new year?
I'm doing well, Sean. I appreciate you having me. I'm glad to be on the show.
No, I'm happy to have you here. I want to get into the football Bucks fun stuff here at the second half of the show. I'm a Jaguars fan, by the way, so I got to live vicariously through all of y'all. But
man, I'm sorry, you must be a glutton for punishment.
I'm a Florida Gator, so you can imagine how I feel about Urban Meyer, but that's a whole nother episode that we'll talk about. But I want to talk to you, Ryan, a little bit about a subject that I know the layperson that has never played football, just watches it, and that's injuries and kind of how the game has progressed, how it's gotten safer, and all those sorts of things. And I want to ask you, football is a sport that is necessarily full of collisions and hits and those sorts of things, and that's kind of part of football. But I want to ask you, when do you know that we're getting into things that aren't necessarily just you can expect as a football player, and we're getting into things that are serious injuries that we need to maybe change the game to try to stop? You understand what I'm saying? Like if I got more experience with basketball. If I sprain my ankle, okay. If I land and break my lower back then we need something else happen. So I just want to, where's that line where football is violence not the right word. Football is collisions and it's aggressive versus maybe we need to think about changing not only the way we play, but the things we play in, the uniforms and the helmets.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, the reality is, Sean, you think about the automobile and you think about the history of the car and you think about the evolution of the car and you bring up collisions and the evolution of the safety of a car and where we are today to even where I was when I was a kid to even where my grandparents were. Cars have gotten so much safer. The airbags, the braking system, the infrastructure, and the way that the cars are constructed and how they can basically, collapse on themselves. It's unbelievable how safe cars have become. The only way cars can become that safe is through years of R&D and repetition and people mandating certain things like seat belts and being able to force manufacturers to develop a very safe vehicle so that we all get in our cars. We don't talk about, very rarely do we talk about collisions or accidents in a way that we talk about injuries in football. But if you think about the evolution of football, it's still relatively a young game, right? But it's continued to grow and it's continued to evolve into a game that's gotten safer. The rules have changed, the equipment's changed, the dang players have changed the way they play. And so no doubt, I believe the game has continued to get safer, and because there's been a more emphasis on trying to protect the players to the best of their ability. At the end of the day, you're not wrong by saying it's a violent sport. It is a violent sport. When you have two grown men running full speed and running into each other, I don't care, what happens. There's going to be a violent collision that's going to take place in that moment. And so not only do you have to think about how to protect the player and the athlete and making sure that they're properly prepared in that moment and hopefully don't sustain long-term injuries or catastrophic injuries in that moment. But we also need to make sure we have, on the other side of it, the rehab, the protocols to come back from those injuries. the fact that there was the young running back for the Rams, for the LA Rams, that tore his Achilles in the summer of this past year, and came back and played in the season. That is unbelievable. You would never, when you tear an Achilles, that used to be, you're done. Your career is over, retire, you're out to the pasture. Not only as you're able to come back from it, the fact that he was able to still come back in the same season and play and contribute at a high level is, to me, a testament to medicine. It's a testament to the protocols and the way that players and teams and leagues and doctors and so on are taking care of guys. But there are moments in games where, whether it's a head collision or a broken leg, or a good friend of mine, a guy named Alex Smith, we saw how his injury, that was horrific. It was a horrific injury. And what he had to go through to come back from that injury was really tough. So Sean, the game is always going to have injuries that you probably aren't going to see in other sports, just because of the violent nature of the game. That said, I think that we're hopefully going to see less of those catastrophic type injuries, and maybe more of the soft tissue, hamstring pulls, ankle sprains, knee sprains. And that's my hope, right? And the crazy part about it is, these players now, and I sound old because I feel old at times, but they are faster, stronger, bigger. And the interesting part is that trend has continued to go up, right? You got guys that are running 300 pounds, running 4 or 5.
I saw the national championship, brother. I don't want none of that.
Did you see the way those guys were running around? It was unbelievable. I was watching those are college. Those aren't grown men, but they were playing like they were grown men. So imagine what they're going to look like in the next 5-10 years. So that's a long-winded way of trying to answer your question, because it's a good one.
I want to continue this and talk about CTE a little bit, because I've spoken to a lot of parents here recently, and they are very reluctant to allow their kids to play youth football, and it's because of that. It's because of the CTE, and they don't want to expose their kids to that. I want you that belief or that tension from the parents. What's the counter to that? What do we say besides Pee Wee football has changed? I know how they're teaching kids to hit. I know the helmets are different, but how do we kind of let parents know that that's not a normal part of football, and that is a kind of something's going to happen on the periphery?
Yeah, it's another great question. And I would venture to say that the vast majority, if not all, the CTE studies have primarily done on professional athletes first. A few collegiate athletes, I think, have donated, and they've shown some studies. So I say that, saying that the chances of that parent's child making it to the NFL is very low. It's just the truth. I know everybody thinks their kid's the next, Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes or Derek Brooks, or the chances are just very low, right? First, and then second, the vast majority of those studies have also been done on offensive linemen or defensive linemen, oftentimes larger individuals that have sustained more head-to-head collisions because they're on the line of scrimmage. Most of the parents I can look at them. Your kid is not going to be an offensive lineman in the NFL. Okay, so let's just take that off the table. Third, I think the game is getting safer. And not even think, I know the game is getting safer all the way down to the Pee Wee level. And their protocols to understanding how to treat concussions. Before, I'm sure, Sean, when you and I were younger, we were running around, you get hit in the head, you feel a little woozy. You just felt a little woozy. You didn't realize maybe you sustained a mild concussion that you needed to sit out and probably maybe rest and then go through a proper treatment. Just like I talked about early with the Achilles, it wasn't until medicine advanced to a point that we can get players to come back, and now they can continue to compete and continue to have a career. The same thing is happening with concussions, with brain injuries. We're starting to develop procedures and rehab treatment to help athletes come back when they sustain a head-to-head collision and or are concussed. So that's only going to continue to get better. The thing that I will tell parents, there are more concussions that happen in youth soccer than any sport, right? And so we have to think about that too, and we have to put that into perspective. So you're not avoiding it by not playing football and going into youth soccer or going into hockey you have the chances of hitting your head in all sports. It's part of sports, it's part of being an athlete. The question I have for most parents, and what I argue, not argue, but what I try to explain to them, if you choose to not allow your child to play football, you're also making the choice to not allow your child to participate in a sport that teaches them about falling down and getting up, that teaches them about character, that teaches about them cheering for a teammate that's on the field while they're off the field. It teaches them about discipline and structure and regimen and understanding how to play through injury and understand how having a skinned knee is actually a part of life. And so I think the principles that you learn, even the dynamics of a head coach, position coach, players, that dynamic mimics the real world in business. And to not expose your child to that environment at a young age so that they can find ways to help them develop their character and understanding as a young man, and even young women now that are playing at the youth level, I think will be even more catastrophic than the rare chance of your child sustaining long-term brain damage because they made it to the NFL. The principles that a young child learns in the game of football at the youth level are so important because we're not teaching those principles in the home, and we're not teaching them in very few places in society. So that, selfishly to me, is why I think the game of football itself, and clearly I'm biased, I drink the Kool-Aid pretty hard, but the game and the way players are coached, the way that they're taught, and the things that they learn to help them as an individual long into their life and every day of their life as a citizen of this globe, I think is extremely important. It's one of the things that people, I always, people like, what makes some things, people like, how does America separate itself? And again, there are certain things that we are training young men and now young women, these principles, and they learn it through our military, they learn it through sports, they learn how to work with people from different walks of life. I tell you, the value of being in a huddle, wow, it's an unbelievable space to be in, to be able to set aside your differences, come together, pursue a goal together, unite because you're playing for something bigger than self. How do you learn that in society right now? That's hard to do. And so that's why sports is so important.
That is the best answer I've heard on that subject. I appreciate that. And you're right. The getting up and falling down and the being a part of a huddle you're exactly right. That teaches you things later on in life and how to deal with adversity and how to deal with just different people when you're all going for the same goals. That's the best answer I've heard. I want to talk just the last on this subject before we get to the fun stuff. When you're watching a broadcast of football, right, or any sport really, but particularly football, the old guys are always saying the game is soft. These rules are all to protect Tom Brady and quarterbacks. The game has changed, and back when we played, it was blah, blah, blah. Well, the game has necessarily evolved, like you said, for various reasons. How do you feel? Is the balance right between safety and keeping the game pure? Is it necessarily evolving how it needs to do, or are you agreeing with the old school guys who says that it's soft now? Because when I watch football, it certainly doesn't look soft to me, but I'm just watching. But what do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's game's changed, and the game has changed both for the good and really for the fan, right? And so and when you think about the emphasis of why the game has changed and the money that's involved, I think it's been great. I will say, no doubt, the game has gotten softer. Right? That word has unique connotations behind it, so it means something different to everybody. But there are rules that protect quarterbacks. I think football in the 80s was probably the purest form of football that was out there as it pertains to where we were from a safety standpoint, a physical standpoint, a rule standpoint. But we realized during that time in the 80s, Again, we talked about these catastrophic injuries and career-ending injuries. I was probably at an all-time high. I don't know the exact numbers, but needless to say, the game has definitely evolved. Just like when my mom and I was driving in the car, my mom used to give me the arm belt, right?
Right.
Our seat belt was her arm going across my chest when she hit the brakes. She might say the game's a little softer when I click on my seat belt and kids are in their car seat till they're 14 now. It's changed, but you've done it in a way in the best interest of the athletes that are on the field, and you've done it in a way to make a great experience for fans. When I think about it, at the end of the day, it is a form of entertainment, Sean, and the numbers are at an all-time high.
Money-making form of entertainment that's at an all-time high.
It's at an all-time high. So they're doing something right? And so that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I think the other sports wish they knew how to do it like the NFL does it, because there's been all this, notwithstanding the emphasis and the focus on the injuries and CTE, the NFL handled it in a way that they are right now back and even better than they were before, and number one, and the viewers and all that stuff. Let's talk about some fun stuff now. Bucks are in the playoffs. And I listen, I'm a glutton for punishment. I'm a Jaguars fan. I was born in Jacksonville, but my number 2 team is Tampa Bay. How are we going to do? What did the season look like for you? We've had some serious wide receiver injuries. How are we looking? How's the offense looking?
Well, it's a great question. Again, I apologize that you're a Jaguars fan, but I appreciate and respect your loyalty, because to even say that on air.
That means, damn it, I'm Florida.
that takes great courage to do that. So, I'll never forget when the front office signed Tom Brady last year in the offseason. And I remember talking to them not long after he was in the building and practice was starting, the season was starting to kick off. And I just said, how's the experience going? And they said, Ryan, Tom has made us all better. I said, wow, I believe that. You think about Tom and his body of work and his wisdom and his knowledge and his understanding of the game, what he's accomplished. No doubt when he steps in the huddle, he's going to make his teammates better. And I shared that, and they go, no, you don't understand. Yes, he's made everybody on the field better, but he's also made our entire organization better. He has set a new standard. He has set a new benchmark for all of us to strive towards, this pursuit of excellence in all things that we do. And so to have an individual come in that can do that and has that much power is pretty amazing. And then you saw it play out in the season, and they go on and they win the Super Bowl. So no doubt, do I think that they have one of the greatest, if not, I'm a Joe Montana guy. That's my, I think Joe is the greatest quarterback of all time, but hard to argue that Tom is not the greatest all time with all that he's accomplished. And what's amazing is he did that in New England, not with a receiver core that was very limited. He didn't have necessarily a lot of Hall of Famers. Randy Moss came in towards the end of his career. And so I say that to give context. Tom doesn't need he doesn't need all the weapons that we had. We would love to have them all. Clearly, losing some of these key receivers, Godwin is somebody that I have tremendous respect for. I think he's going to play for a long time in this league and is going to be a dangerous weapon. Not having him on the field is surely missed. That said, we saw in the last game, Tom can play without these guys. He's got the next man up. They have the next man up philosophy. I know he's going to get these young guys ready to play. I know they're going to come in with a swagger and a mentality that they have an advantage over their opponent. And the advantage is they've gone through it. They have a recipe. It's like cooking that favorite pie again that your grandma sent you that recipe. You got it. You got the secret sauce. You understand how it works. And if somebody tried to make that again, like the Eagles coming in, they maybe haven't experienced it. There's a little bit of doubt in their mind. It's new to them. And where it matters most, Sean, in that moments is when the game gets a little dicey. You're not sure where it's going to go towards the last 2 minutes and a half, last 2 minutes of the game. That's when the Bucs and Tom will step up, and I think they'll continue to find ways. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see them in the Super Bowl. You got some tough teams in the NFC. You got the Rams. You got the Cardinals. The Niners look hot all of a sudden. Green Bay. It's all got to go through Green Bay, and we know how we do in the cold weather. If we end up having to play in Green Bay, that could be hard. But again, Tom's played there. He's going to have everybody on that team well prepared on how to handle that in those environments. So
No,
money's on the Bucs.
I've never seen somebody make more money for wide receivers than Tom Brady, and I've never seen a coach make more money for other coaches than Belichick has. But,
it's unbelievable.
They have made some people some money.
I would argue more money for backup quarterbacks too. Those guys, it's crazy.
No, that's true. The backups to Tom Brady when he gets hurt make a lot of money, and then we see what normally happens. I want to ask you a question because it relates to this a little bit, because you mentioned something about Brady making everyone better. And certainly in my life, when I see someone that is very successful and I come into contact with them, I want to do what they've been doing. When they say something, I believe it. When they do something, I want to do it because they've got a track record. And I know Tom Brady walks into the building, and when he gets to practice at 6:30 in the morning, everyone knows this isn't a show. This is Tom Brady being Tom Brady, and I need to get my stuff together too. And I can imagine that that's how it just elevates everything. And when Tom says something, there's no pushback because it's Tom Brady, and
It's right. Look, when the guy says jump, you're going to say how high and how many times, right? Because he's garnered that. He's demonstrated that he has a recipe for success. You want that. You want to know what his secret sauce is. And so he's probably, not probably, he is sharing it with his teammates and with that team. And so, yeah, I agree. I'm the same way. I'm constantly trying to surround myself with men and women that pursue excellence so that I too can learn, because I feel like you have to see it. You got to be around it. You got to immerse yourself in it to understand what it takes, right? A lot of people talk about, I know what it takes to climb that mountain. Well, if you've never really climbed it with people that have climbed it, or you've seen the way that they've done that, you could be off, right?
I want people climbing it better than me, even if I have climbed it. I want to be I want to be the worst of my friends, so to speak. I want everyone to be pulling me along. That's kind of the people I like to surround myself with. So that was one of the questions I was going to ask you. What's football taught you in your life? And you mentioned it a little bit, but tell me some of the positive things football's done for you just professionally.
Well, a couple things. One, I think about the role and the responsibility that we have as leaders and athletes to be able to be heroes and sheroes in our community, right? You got young kids that look up to you. You have the ability to play a role and make an impact in your community. And so one of the things I got a chance to do and continue to do in Tampa is serve the community. The community gave so much.
Talk about it. That's where I was going to go.
And so being able to have our foundation, the Ryan Nece Foundation, that's headquarters in Tampa, we celebrated 15 years last year, which is amazing. That makes me feel old as well. That is one of the best things that I've ever done in my life, and will continue to put my heart into that. And our ability to serve young minds and teach them about the principles of giving through our student service program. I learned all those things playing ball. And so 100%. Also understanding what it takes, being around men that are Hall of Famers, and Derek Brooks and Warren Sapp and John Lynch and all the other players that I got a chance to line up with and compete with, and understand what it takes to be great. And oftentimes, Sean, it's the little things. It's the things that most people don't want to do. And those are the things that those guys did at the highest level over and over. And I've learned that sometimes you have to do what you don't want to do to be what you want to be. And then competing's a hard thing. We think about it as it pertains to sports, but you and I both know we're competing in everything in life, right? I'm competing for my wife's attention versus Yellowstone on TV, right? I'm constantly competing. And how do you compete? How do you show up? How do you give your best self to win? And so that is something that's really important to me as well. And, there's a number of other things, but, I'm so thankful that I had a chance to play and got a chance to learn a lot of things that have helped me in my life today.
No, Ryan, I appreciate this, man. This has been great. I'm going to end with something. I know you get it all the time, but look, my father was well known in his field. And I know your father is very well known in football, but I'm not going to ask you the corny question, what's it like having a dad like Ryan Lott? Because I get sick of answering that question too. But I am going to tell you, you're my age, so I bet you played Tecmo Bowl growing up. And let me tell you, there were only 2 or 3 defensive players that you wanted to play. It was Ronnie Lott, Lawrence Taylor, and Mike Singletary in that game.
That's
so
it.
I'm just telling you.
That's it. I learned to compete. I was playing technical. Yeah, I'm going to be my dad on this one, fellas. So we're going to go ahead.
No, brother, that's awesome, man. Well, I appreciate you joining us today. And when the Jaguars finally get good, I'll get you back on so we can talk a little bit. But that might be 10 years from now. So we'll talk way in the future.
Hey, fingers crossed. They got a good quarterback. Hopefully, they'll build something around him.
Well,
I appreciate it, Sean.
Something. But Ryan, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for kind of the behind the scenes here. And I hope we have you back when you're in Tampa. And thank you for what you're doing in the community. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you so much. God bless. Take care.
All right, welcome to another segment of Vanguards of Democracy. This is Sean. I'm here with my good friend, Councilman Joe Citro, and I don't say good friend to everybody, you know, but Joe is Councilman Citro is a good friend of mine, and I'm going to say it on air. He's going to get on my boat. We had it scheduled, and as always happens, something went wrong with the boat, but I'm saying this on camera, Councilman, that you're going to get on the boat. So I want to let you know that.
Oh, I was going to bring that up, Sean.
I know you were.
First of all, thank you for allowing me to be,
of course,
with you. And you know, this is something I've been wanting for a long time. You have this wall of fame over to my left. Very impressive people. Thank you for allowing me to be on your show. And as your young intern said, my head will hang on your wall.
You were one of the trophy heads that we're going to put on here on the wall. But no, I appreciate you joining us today. And I know that you have been in Tampa for a while.
Since 1974.
Since 1974. What's the city look like now? We've gone through a lot of changes, but what have you seen since you've...
Sean, it's one of those things that in 1974, I would have never imagined. But I used to live over in Clearwater back in 66. Mm-hmm. Waters was still a dirt road west of Dale Mabry.
Oh, wow.
I was here when Dale Mabry was a 2-lane road. You cannot imagine the things. And being a council person, I now go back and see some of the things the former mayors have done. And without those former mayors doing what they did, sometimes getting the wrath of the taxpayers saying, why are you spending our taxpayers' dollars? Ybor would not be what it is today. Downtown would not be what it is today. Other parts
that Riverwalk.
And something, Julian B. Lane Park.
Right.
And I knew there were people that complained, $35 million on one park. It's paying off in dividends. Mm-hmm. It truly is. I would have never thought. I was here when the 2 tallest buildings in downtown were First Florida, which is now something I can't remember, Sykes or Likes, and the Flordane. So this town has changed dramatically, and it has finally become what we were wanting it to be, the big city.
It is. It's a big little city. That's why I like it.
Well, you know, and I keep saying
because it's not Miami. Which none of us want.
But we are that pimply-faced 17-year-old whose hormones are going crazy, and we don't know what to do with ourselves, and we're finally grasping on saying, okay, these are the things that we need to take care of.
No, I think you're right. Your interest in politics, you are currently on the Tampa City Council, and I think doing a great job, which I wouldn't say about everybody, but I just wanted to give it context because I don't give the compliments out if I don't mean them. What first got you interested in politics, and were you always interested in city municipal stuff, or was it a general interest?
Fair question. Give you an honest answer. I had bought my first house, 2000, and I was sitting on the back porch. I was complaining about all these fees and things that I didn't know that I was. And my friend of mine who was drunk at the time said, "Well, you ought to run for mayor." And I said,
a lot of our political careers started with either us or a friend. Yeah.
So I went to my very good friend, Mary Alvarez, who was city council at the time, and said, "Mary, get me involved." From that point, I was Civil Service Board.
Yeah, you had a long history before.
Code Enforcement Board as a magistrate, Variance Review Board, Charter Review Commission. Also working with YCDC here. Michelle Van Loan, her eyes are rolling back in her head right now. Excuse me. The Ybor City CRACAC. And I learned a lot about how the government's run here, how to get things done, who to communicate. But then once I got elected, I only scratched the surface, brother. Mm-hmm. You get in and you start delving deeper and deeper, and there is a lot to learn.
I was just talking to another guest about,
getting into politics, and we like people that have a record prior to running for office. And you had that record. You were involved in all those boards, you said, and you proved to people, look, I have an interest here, but not only do I have an interest, I'm willing to put my time, I'm willing to put in the work, and I'm willing to do the learning. So people knew you before you got on the board, and so they're comfortable with you. So here you are. That's how you do it. You run out of nowhere, and oftentimes people sometimes don't get the reception they want when they run out of nowhere, and you wonder why. People want to see that kind of record of service.
Well, let's first clarify. He is not talking about any type of illegal activity record.
Correct.
He's talking
Political
about records. Yes, and I think that's a lot of things that most voters don't take into consideration. If you vote for somebody that doesn't have some sort of record, doesn't have some sort of experience, whether it be in the community or whether it be in government, but something that says, hey, I've paid my dues, I've learned, I understand, I talk to people. I think just because you like somebody,
right?
That's good. That's great. Voters need to like the person they're voting for, but they also have to see what their experience is. Because if you don't have any experience, you're going to have 2 years of somebody trying to learn how to do the job.
The like thing is becoming much less important to me as I go year to year.
Yeah.
I'm much more interested in the record and what you do rather than when I like you, because I think we've gotten into a lot of trouble here based on who we like or who we think is the most charming.
Yes.
And I'm not just talking about local. I mean, I'm talking about state and national. What are your? I mean, you're on the council now. You've been doing this. What are you most proud of? Like what's in the kind of this early stages? What are you happiest about? What are you most proud of?
The thing I'm the most proud of is the clean energy resolution I submitted.
Talk about that.
I would love to. It was one of those things that I went out and listened to the community, all 400 people, started listening to more and more people and saying, yeah, President Biden has this plan by 2035. Why can't we become more and more similar to that type of plan? And the low-hanging fruit is the easiest to get. LED lights, solar panels on governmental buildings, those type of things. But as we get closer to 2035, the electric vehicles, especially in fire trucks and garbage, that's going to be the tougher. I went out, again, talked to people, drafted up a resolution, and as soon as it hit public records, Tallahassee already had preemption bills lined up. So I had to go back, rewrite, listening to API and other people that were against it, finally came to a compromise. Now, I went back because other cities, counties, municipalities were calling me up. Councilman Citro, we love your idea, but we've already had things that are in the process, and we're chugging along, becoming more resilient. If your resolution goes through and they preempt, they're going to retroact everything. So that's going to stop everything. So I had to go back. Excuse me. I didn't have to. I wanted to. Because this is bigger than the city of Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
So I went ahead, reintroduced it, and it was voted 6-1 to pass it. And I understand the one council person that didn't want it. I understand his logic and his theory. And that's some things in politics that we have to get used to. Even though somebody is your friend,
right?
They may have different thoughts and different.
And
ideas.
even though if they vote against you, doesn't mean they're not your friend.
No, that's correct. So it passed, and we are starting to put it into motion, especially by our council standing up. Said this is what we want to do. Now, is it hand in hand with what the mayor's resiliency is? Not letter for letter, but I support the mayor and Whit Reamer on what they're doing. I'm just hoping it's going to happen a little faster.
Right.
And we can get there. Like I say, let's take care of the low-hanging fruit. Let's look at the budgets for the next 4 years, and hopefully we'll get it done quicker.
One of the things I appreciate about you is, like, I see you out in the community in all areas, everywhere. And that's important for an elected official to be out in the community. That's where you learn what's going on. It's not, this is something I learned. What I thought was important wasn't necessarily important to my constituents. It was less important to them sometimes, but I needed to be out in the community talking to people, and things would bubble up that you had no idea were a big deal. And things would bubble up over here in this area that you didn't know you needed to focus on. You're just, we're busy, our usual talking points. And then when you knock on doors or you're at community events, you hear a lot of things. And so that's why I really appreciate politicians who are elected not just running for reelection or not just running for office, that are elected and are going to be there a while, still going to these community events to listen to people, sometimes not be nice to them, but welcome to politics. If you can't take it, then we're in the wrong business. So I appreciate that about you always. I want to talk about East Tampa a little bit because I was talking to a prior guest, and East Tampa, like South St. Pete, because I was talking to somebody from St. Petersburg, needs some loving, tender care. And when you have everyone run, we're going to do this in East Tampa, we're going to do that, and we're going to invest money, and yet it still kind of remains chronically under resourced. How do we address this in a way that is sustained? This is not an overnight thing. East Tampa didn't get to where it is overnight. It's not going to repair itself overnight, but it does need, I think, sustained efforts on behalf of city, county officials, state officials. What do you think would be most beneficial to continue and to help serve the people of East Tampa?
I'm not bragging again, but as chair of the CRA, the Community Redevelopment Agency, the part of the ad valorem taxes that are collected in East Tampa are set aside and reinvested right back into East Tampa. We hear a word thrown around a lot called gentrification. And I understand the points that people that have lived here want to stay here, want their families to stay here. And developers, good, bad, or indifferent, they're just doing business. And when someone is living in a house and the house has gone almost beyond repair, and a developer comes in and says, I will give you this for your house, not wanting the house, wanting the property. And that owner sees this check that is more money than they've ever seen in their life. But they don't realize that they have to move somewhere else, that they can't stay in the neighborhood. CRA now has different types of funding to help that person repair their house, clean up the stuff around the house that may need in their yards, paint their house, do electrical stuff, so that we can keep people in their house, so they're not moving out, so they're staying in the community. I brag about that because that is something we're putting in place. There are some people in East Tampa that say you're not doing it quick enough.
Right.
But
No,
we still need to take time. We're taking that initiative. We're taking that step.
There's a tension between the market and people that don't want gentrification. There's a tension there. If the market dictates that lot can be sold and the person wants to sell, that's the market. But there's a tension between progress and gentrification that we got to make sure we strike the right balance.
And that's one way. How can I tell a elderly woman who has lived in her house for 65 years, seen her children grow up, maybe have seen her husband die, and now wants to live her golden years in an assisted living facility and just wants to? Am I supposed to tell her, no, you can't sell that house for top value? I can't do that.
Right.
So there's got to be let's keep as many people in their homes as we can. Let's try and find more affordable / workforce housing, and be able to keep the neighborhood the way it is, but yet let it grow up.
Right. There's a tension there, but you're exactly correct.
And there are some people with some great ideas. Fair Oaks, that is going to be a great development. Now there are people that want to make that into a community where people can sell their homes but move into a high rise or a condominium type atmosphere, where maybe on the ground floor is their doctor, maybe on the ground floor is a grocery store or a pharmacy or something, so they don't have to get into a car and travel somewhere else, but yet they're still staying in the community.
Right. What issues are kind of drive you that are most important to you? I know climate, you mentioned one, and some of this redevelopment gentrification discussion I know might be one, but what are the issues that are important to you as a city council person?
Water. Water is,
which we're going to go on a tour of Tampa Bay here in a little while, via my boat, but we'll get a good tour.
And people think water, we're surrounded by water. Yeah, but can we drink it?
Yeah.
And we're finding out our water quality in the Bay is changing. And I'm going to use a word here that I really don't like, and it's called preemption. No offense to you, but there And because you're not in Tallahassee, but
I bet I also voted against every one when I was, but go ahead.
There are a lot of people in Tallahassee that love to preempt anything we do. And most of those people that write those bills don't even live anywhere near Tampa.
I know.
We had a tree ordinance 3 years in the making where contractors, neighborhood associations, and legal got together to make sure that it was the most economic and environmentally and legally binding. We had an apprenticeship program that Councilman Vieira put through. Not more than 5 minutes after we voted on it, Tallahassee was preempting it. My resolution got preempted. We have been reintroducing drinking quality water back into the bay, which has made our bay cleaner than it's been in 50 years. Tallahassee is preempting that, and now we have to find out some other ways to where to put that water. We want to put it up in the reservoir to make sure that during drought times we have enough. We want to introduce it back into Sulphur Springs so we keep the salinity level down. But now we're almost being forced to pump it back into our aquifers, which I'm okay with that, with the exception of two things: pharmaceuticals and heavy metals.
Mm-hmm.
Which is going to cost us more to reverse osmosis to pump it down there than, in my opinion, what it's going to be worth. Then we're going to be forced to sell it to other communities. That's fine. But now we have to come up with a pipeline to the other communities to sell it to them. It's like Coca-Cola saying, hey, we'll sell you our Coke, but you got to hook up a line to get it to your house.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense. And it's all preemption.
From elected officials who usually talk about how local control is so great. And then they want to preempt everything that they don't like. And you know what's fascinating about that? This is to get into the weeds. Those same elected officials that are in Tallahassee as state reps and state senators return back to their communities after their term's over, run for county commission, or run for city council, or run for some local office. And then you literally will see that same person, literally, up in Tallahassee 2 sessions in, testifying against a preemption bill. Because now they see it's impossible to be on the city or county commission in Florida without getting all your stuff preempted in Tallahassee. It's fascinating to watch that cycle.
Another thing I'm really, really interested in, and I'm not an environmentalist anyway, but I'm a fisherman, just like you, is seagrasses in and around our area.
Need to catch my trout.
We're losing our seagrasses, and I would like to see the City of Tampa and Hillsborough County come up with some sort of maintenance program.
Yeah.
We're hearing about sea level rise. Well, I was talking with people about MacDill Air Force Base. MacDill Air Force Base, during a hurricane, they can evacuate. But let's make sure there's a base for them to return to. Because if we get enough beach erosion, half of that's gone. So there's maintenance that we can do to help protect our shorelines, to also replant grasses, which is going to keep our fishing industry alive. I mean, you got a boat. I don't. I'd have to pay $750 for a guide to take me out.
I'm going to be much cheaper than that.
I'll buy you all the beer you want to drink, and I'll clean.
And I don't drink beer. That's your other problem. It's Scotch.
And I'll clean your boat after we're done.
No, you're right. And we had the red tide issue, and then we had the Piney Point issue, and it shows you how fragile it is out here. I went out on the boat one day before I realized what was going on, and there were dead fish everywhere, and it was just red tide. And you see, redfish season and trout season and sixth season hadn't been open. I think it's open now, but it wasn't open for years in this area because of all these. It's fragile, but it's the best part of Florida. It's the best part of living around here. We got to protect it, and protect it now.
Right.
And you got to protect it. You got to be intentional about it, though. If you had a wish list, we're getting to the end here, but if you had a wish list, you could fast track one piece of legislation that's either pending before the council or that's not pending before the council that you could wave the wand, what would it be?
There are so many.
General Citro, you get to pass whatever you want.
That's tough. We got something coming up Thursday that I've gotten probably, I don't know, 150 emails about, getting calls constantly. I can't discuss it right now. That's tough to say. I want pipes to be over with. I want our city's infrastructure, water infrastructure, pipe infrastructure, some of which is over 100 years old. I want that to be completed. It's time to stop repairing, start replacing.
You got to address it. and stop kicking it to the next council.
And
Yeah.
we got a 2.6 billion. Yes, that's with a B. Pipes project. Pure. There's so many things. You know, I'm really disliking that toilet to tap. Where do we get our water from? Hillsborough River. Well, you know, there's fish poop in there. There's gator poop. There's, you know, we have to figure out that our community is growing so quickly, and other surrounding areas, that we don't have the water. We're going to have to figure out what we're going to do. Fertilizers. What are we going to do about fertilizers? Both what with the refuge at Piney Point, plus the gypsum stacks, plus what we're putting on our lawn. Sean, I wish I could just say one thing. I can't.
Well, you said you weren't an environmentalist, but you damn sure sound like one to me, man. But I appreciate.
I'm a fisherman, and all this pollution is running. I was out with a man named Jim Anderson, great man, and what he does is he farms grass, seagrass, and we were out in the middle of the bay, out near Cockroach, and I look over at St. Pete, clear skies, wonderful. I look over at City of Tampa, hazy.
Yeah.
What's different? And I figured whatever is in the air is eventually going to make it into our. I'll tell you what. Let me digress.
Yeah.
1 cent sales tax for transportation.
Yes.
People do not realize that the breakdown of what it would take to stop FDOT from building and have better mass public transportation. 50% is feds. 25% is state, 25% is local. City of Tampa has nothing to do with collecting taxes for transportation. That's all Hillsborough County. Our priority list for better transportation has gone up and down on the priority list for the last 35 years, simply because we do not have that 25%.
Yeah, you've got to have some skin in the game. I mean, I was on that committee, and I saw the projects that were coming, and they were so exciting, things that were going to be done, and to handle this and to handle that in terms of transit. And then, you know, the Supreme Court of Florida did what it did, and we're sitting here wishing that we could get those projects funded. But I agree with you, that 1 cent sales tax is going to be really important.
Bright line's coming. You're going to have mom and dad with 2 kids in tow and luggage looking for either Busch Gardens, the beaches, the airport, a sporting event. How are they going to get it? There's not enough scooters, not enough bikes. There's not enough Ubers and Lyfts. There has to be a multimodal hub somewhere where it's going to end here in Ybor City. That's going to get them to either CSX, hopefully, which is going to be some sort of rail to the airport, or to our HART bus system.
Yeah,
we can't do that.
That's the next.
Have money.
That takes us from a 17-year-old pimply kid to a 21-year-old college
22-year-old graduate.
There you go. Yes. There you go.
Then we'll hit the big time. So, Commissioner Gwen Myers, with hope, is going to reintroduce, and with hope, especially you, the voters, we're gonna pass this thing and get that 1 cent sales tax.
Nope, I agree. Listen, thank you. I appreciate it. Let me remind everyone that's listening, he'll be on the boat. We'll take pictures just to prove to y'all that I keep my word. But I appreciate you joining us, Councilman.
Right. We got some bets. Buck first fish. Buck.
Yep, we got all that.
Biggest fish.
But biggest, ugliest first. We got money. And again, like you can try to buy all the beer, but it's probably gonna be White Claw actually if it's on the water. So you know,
I'll get you your single malt.
I gotta admit, well, then the trip is gonna be different. So, but I appreciate you joining us today. You're one of my favorite on the city council, just because I like that you're willing to talk to anyone about anything, and it shouldn't be rare, but it is rare. So I appreciate you joining us. Thank you for joining Vanguards of Democracy. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sean.
Vanguards of Democracy is funded and produced by Vanguard Attorneys, a local personal injury law firm serving the Tampa Bay area with ingenuity and an indomitable work ethic. Don't forget to follow Vanguards of Democracy on YouTube, or download episodes on your favorite podcast streaming services like iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And lastly, we're excited to announce that we're launching our new landing page, www.vanguardsofdemocracy.com, where you'll be able to ask questions, recommend guests or topics, and stay up to date with news and announcements. It'll be great. If you know how to bookmark a website, this is the one that'll make it worth it. Thank you.